I would like to go ahead and start this Rules Committee meeting. Both Chairwoman Fraley and Vice Chairman Anglin are unavailable at this time, but we need to go ahead and start, and I was asked to go ahead and chair. And Councilman Thornton, if you would be so kind as to do the invocation for us today.
Dear Heavenly Father, be with each one of us today and help us do the business of the Cherokee Nation. Help us bring forth our districts and our council to represent our people. Be with our overseas military personnel and protect them, and be with their families at home, get them through this war. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councilman Thornton. And if you'll give us the roll call, please.
Meredith Fraley, Buell Anglin, Bill John Baker,
Here.
Jack Baker,
Here.
Harley Buzzard,
Here.
Julia Coates, Bradley Cobb, Joe Crittenden,
Here.
Jody Fishinghawk, Janelle Fulbright, Don Garvin, Chuck Hoskin Jr., China Gloria Jordan, Curtis Snell,
Here.
Chris Soap,
Here.
David Thornton, Sarah Cowan Ross. We do have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Okay, at this time, we're going to have Chairman Roger Johnson from the Election Commission come forward and present to us these proposed changes from the Election Commission. And just for your information, on page 10, and they're numbered by hand, when Chairman Johnson and the Election Commission are done presenting their requested changes for consideration by the committee, we will begin again at page 10 for us. So if the committee has no objections, we'll go ahead and have Chairman Johnson and the Election Commission present theirs.
Madam Chair, at the last meeting, I made a commitment, the Election Commission did, to address each one of the individual issues, which we did. My intent was to get it before you before today, but as it turned out, it was just placed in front of you just prior to the meeting. So I understand that you haven't had an opportunity to look at any of these suggestions or comments, and I know that you want to take the time to do that. So perhaps at the next meeting we could do that and go over all of them. But also at this time I'd like to present our attorney. He has a few things he'd like to say to you. He's been working with us on these proposed amendments or comments to them. Mr. Lloyd Cole.
And Chairman Johnson, I would encourage you to go ahead and present them. They seem like small, minor, technical, and if there's something we need to table, we'll table to another meeting. But if we could, we'll go ahead and go through them while you have your commission here in front of us today.
Well, we can do that.
But if you want, just please proceed with your introduction too, because he may want to weigh in on some of this.
Okay. And anybody want to step forward here and assist me with this?
Well, Madam Chairman, members of the committee, we're just here to give you some assistance. I see some of these amendments seem to have already passed, so we're not telling you how or what to do, but we'd like to have some input to some of them because some of the terminology is only particularly referring to the Election Commission, and some of that can be done, but by and large, what we are suggesting to you is to kind of conform to where we are at the present time, and we've made some notations, and each one of you have those. We were furnished a list of the changes, proposed changes, and some of the changes that you have made from your counsel, Mr. Henry. And with that, those documents, we looked at them. These are our responses to those, so you're at liberty, each one of you, to have an opportunity to look at that and consider them on an individual basis. And in the future, if there's any input that we can give you and assistance that we can provide to the council, we'd be more than happy to do so, so that we can all be on the same page when we start to.
So, Counselor, these ones in front of us, you believe are likely not duplicates. These are new amendments requested, both technical amendments like minor.
Yes. They are terminology and There is some changes, for instance, the number of districts. The one thing that that I don't think you've addressed that's in these suggestions that we've given you before here today is the walk-in privilege of voters to vote there at the offices of the Cherokee Nation Election Commission. You find it back toward the back end of it. We have found that that's a pretty popular effort to make people, and we've wanted to enlarge upon it. The way it is currently, there's only just 2-3 days of it. We want to extend it to Thursdays and Fridays, I think, and maybe even Saturdays.
Okay, so maybe we'll proceed line item by line item, and
Okay.
you'll begin with the first one.
All right?
Okay.
So that's section 12. Is there a motion to change board member to inspector on section 12? If you'll go back further in our section, the actual legislation is behind the numbered pages, if that helps. So it's section 12 referring to precinct boards.
We would prefer that they didn't contact the board members. The inspector is the one who's in charge of those polling places, and that's the appropriate person to be referred to in that particular paragraph.
So is that section D only under, or sub item D under section 12, or is there multiple places that would be a board member to inspector change?
It's section 12. It's the second page. It says to report conduct which appears to the precinct board member, which should be the precinct inspector, based on actual observations or information from another person to violate section 52 of this act to appropriate authorities.
I'm sorry, did you give a number or a subsection?
It is just, it looks like C12. It's handwritten by Mr. Hembry.
Oh, you're going off of that instead of the legislation. Okay. So it's C12. In the actual legislation, it would be under duties, and it would be item number 12, which would be an addition.
That's what it shows, number 12. Instead of precinct board member, that should be the inspector who...
Okay, do I hear a motion?
I move to approve.
Hold on, point of clarification. Actually, Mr. Hoskins has his
I
hand raised.
withdraw, I think, after the motion.
Okay.
Question.
I saw 3 hands up at once, so we'll go from Mr. Baker and then Councilwoman Gloria Jordan.
Why don't you go ahead and take your motion, and then we speak to it.
Okay, Councilwoman?
I'll wait for the motion too.
Do I hear a motion then? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, the motion's by Brad Cobb, and the second's by Chuck Hoskins, and we have the attorney has her hand up. Hembry.
Yes, Madam Chairman, and I guess just a point for explanation, on the proposed amendment, it says to report conduct to which appears to the precinct board member based on actual observations, et cetera, et cetera. The reason it says board members is that's the way it's referred to in the actual section of the law. When you go to section 12, it says precinct boards, establishment of precinct board. There shall be a precinct board position of not more than 10 persons or 12 persons. It's not intended to be. You can make a report to the commissioner.
So I'm hearing that this should be a section 13, this should be an item 13 under C, that would be a new deal, that any discrepancies due with election would be reported to the inspector, precinct inspector.
I have no problem with the terminology of inspector, except we'll need to define that, because that's not a definition under the Act, inspector.
Okay.
There's precinct board members and there's election commissioners, and I think we might be bleeding in between the meaning of the two.
I have a point of information, I
The
guess.
inspector is the only person.
Point of
The
clarification.
inspector is the only person we communicated
I'm
with
sorry.
at that point.
Ms. Morton, I'm sorry, hold on, we've got people on the floor.
I'm sorry, but your
Point of information.
Clarification. If you look at A under precinct boards, it goes on to say each precinct board shall be appointed and approved by the election commission. Responsibilities of each board official shall be established by the election commission and may include titles such as inspector, judge, clerk, and other positions deemed necessary by the election commission. So I think when we're saying board member, we're leaving it to you to tell us what we're going to call it. And as you pointed out, one of those would be inspector.
And that responsibility of that kind of a problem falls on the shoulder of the inspector of each polling place.
And you're going to name it. You're going to say that this board member is the inspector.
Their
And
policies and procedures provide that.
Each polling place has an individual who holds that position
that,
and that responsibility.
yes. And I think it's already in the law, but
It is.
Thank you, Councilman Baker. Councilman Hoskins, and then we had Ms. Morton wanted to come forward.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, just to sort of echo what Todd Henry said, I mean, we didn't have inspector defined anywhere except that it was among the possible titles of board members. I actually authored, I think, this change, this additional number 12 to the duties, and just the idea behind it was to empower them to tell board members if the internal chain of command is such that the inspector is really the point person, then I suppose that's something
correct.
that the commission can develop through its rules and procedures. That's my opinion of it.
That's correct.
So I think the change is not necessary.
Ms. Morton, did you want to come forward and say something to the committee?
I yield to Martha Calico.
If someone wants to speak, they'll need to come to the stand and come forward. Okay, so here, if they're not, if you'll come forward.
We use, Madam Chairman, we use the word inspector as the head person of our precinct. The precinct consists of about 7 to 10 people. The inspector is the number one person there. They are over everyone. What we're trying to say is all the information, everything needs to go to the inspector, and the inspector then comes back to the office commissioner, however that goes. This is what we're trying to say, rather than going to one of the 10 or 12 precinct workers, go to the inspector.
And Commissioner Calico, you've been through several of these, so you're saying that based on the past experiences, we do need to clarify this in the law should something come about? Or is there no reason that is there a reason it can't be done through your policy?
Because of something that may come about. It's worded elsewhere where it says a watcher contacts a board member. A watcher just watches in there. If they see anything wrong, they report their information, what they see, to the inspector. The inspector then calls the commission, and then one of the commissioners work there with it.
Thank you very much for the clarification, Commissioner Calico. Mr. Hoskins?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And, what 12 is designed to do is to correct what I think is maybe not so much a deficiency in the law, just a deficiency in how it actually operates. I mean, my sense from my limited scope in District 9 was that people that are working the precincts didn't appreciate that they could report these problems. So that's why the paragraph 12 is designed to tell them that's one of your duties. One of your duties is if you see something, you're to report it. How it's reported internally, I don't think is necessarily something we have to get into the details of. Just so long as the people that are on the ground, on the front lines, know that one of their duties is to report misconduct. And that's the goal. And if it needs to be changed in terms of board member to inspector, I guess I can agree with that. I'm just not sure it needs to, because any board member, I mean, I suppose there's multiple board members on the front lines, right? I mean, there's more.
There are, but
So if a board member sees something that's unlawful as they perceive it, I mean, they have a duty to report it. Maybe that duty is effectuated by telling the inspector, and that's fine. But I don't think we have to necessarily spell that out. So, provided that each board member understands they've got an obligation not to turn a blind eye to misconduct.
well, this amendment would appear that anybody who has an objection, a legitimate objection, if they make that known to any one of the board members, they think that's officially done. We think that it must be to the inspector who is in charge of that group and has the responsibility of taking care of that objection and seeing that it's addressed.
I appreciate that point. I think that this section deals with the duties of board members. Is that correct? This larger section, it originally had 11 duties of board members, and this adds a 12. So every board member now has an obligation to report to appropriate authorities. I don't care what appropriate authorities are, because I'm sure the commission can figure out who the point person is. So this isn't designed to tell the general public if you see something that's misconduct. It's designed to add one more obligation of board members. So I think it's kind of limiting to say you need to change board member to inspector, because it's designed to tell all board members they have this obligation.
If that's the intent of this amendment, then I would agree with you. But it appeared to me that it was leaving a suggestion to those who are objecting to some irregularity that they could just tell any board member, and that would be official. And I think that might not weigh very heavy in the court system if there's a question arose as to what that objection was, whether it was legitimate or not.
And let's read through it. It says, Section 12, precinct boards. Then it comes down to Section C, duties. Each precinct board shall oversee the conduct of the elections assigned within its precinct within the district, including the following specific duties. And then it lists 1 through 11. The 12th would be one more duty of a precinct board. So I'm not sure why it's not clear that this goes to the duties of a precinct board.
Okay.
And with that, I withdraw my second to the motion to amend.
And Councilor Cobb, did you hear your second's been withdrawn?
I would withdraw my original motion.
Okay. So, will there be any?
And I would agree with his observation. I don't have those other documents in front of me, the other 11 provisions of that particular subparagraph. But if that's the intent of this, rather than to direct it to the individual members of the polling committee.
Okay, so we'll Shelley, our secretary, will make sure and send you the actual legislation so you can see it within the context.
That'd be great.
Of that.
That'd be fine.
To make sure that you have that. Yes, Councilman, so.
Yes, I do have one question though, because it does leave open that what we just discussed, you have to take the viewpoint that the board member did observe the infraction or the questionable activity. In this statement it says, or information from another person. So who is that other person? Is that the watchman? Is that, who is that? So at that point in time, since we've included this other person in there, shouldn't they have some type of direction towards a specific individual that they need to report it to?
Well, there could be a number of different reasons arising at that polling place that prompted someone, either a watcher or a clerk, or even the inspector himself. That might be an irregularity.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's pointless to kind of create an inspector, because then the whole board assumes responsibility for any types of communications that would arise out of the election process.
He's the one that's responsible for the conduct of the election at that poll.
Right. And just something to think about as we move past this is that there is the introduction of another person here. So I just think that there's some guidance there that should be reviewed. Thank you.
Okay, we have Councilman Hoskin and then Councilman Bill John Baker.
Yeah, just briefly, Madam Chairman, I think what tends to happen is you tend to have a voter go into the polling place and say, hey, so-and-so is right outside the door passing out literature. It has been the case that there's been times when board members have done absolutely nothing in response to that. That shouldn't be that way. And so number 12 is designed to put them on notice that they've got an obligation to do that. So if somebody walks in and says, hey, somebody's passing out literature right outside your door, well, they can't escape that obligation. Now, if you guys want to internally set up a rule that says if a board member gets that information to put paragraph 12 into effect, you got to go to your inspector, and that's the chain of command. By all means, set up a chain of command, but let's not have a board member turn a blind eye or a deaf ear to violations right outside the polling place, and that's what this really is designed to impact.
And I would agree with you if that was the purpose of it, then that meets that purpose. But it wasn't my understanding that was.
And again, it's important to read these things in context.
Exactly.
And you may not have known about the existence of the statute we have, but
exactly.
But it is in the context of a larger provision.
Is that it?
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Hoskin. Councilman Bill John Baker.
And I don't think we're reinventing the wheel, but, I have been an inspector for the state, precinct inspector. And in the trainings that they give, the inspector is the one that is the point person, and every other employee of the election commission at that election, if they see something, if they report it to the inspector, and the inspector's the only one that is authorized to talk to the election commission. And so, I mean, I understand where they're coming from, but I just think under A, it is clarified enough that it says that whether you call it inspector, judge, clerk, or position titles deemed necessary by the election commission, that I think the election commission has all the teeth they need to call the head honcho, the inspector, or whatever they want to, and set up their chain of command for that particular precinct. And so I don't see that we need to change anything.
We should probably spend more time on it we need to in the first place.
Well, I do think it's important. I mean, this is a pretty critical area.
It is.
So I'm glad we had the discussion, but I would
And I see what
ask and suggest to you that you also put in, if the inspector fails to act, that there would be another chain of command that you would follow up with a phone call directly to the board here, and as well maybe the marshal service, that there would be some definitive through your policies that would give assurance to the integrity of our election that people were to review the documents, the process.
I agree with you. And we'll endeavor to do that.
Okay, I believe we've exhausted this particular item. So the next item is 5A, district boundaries. And it says add districts 12 through 5. And Councilor Henry.
Yes, legislative act 0101 creating the 15 districts. 12 through 5 has just been inadvertently left off.
Will you make sure that is technically brought back?
With the Keeler. That has.
I noticed I was MIA as well. So you're not the only one.
Motion for correcting.
It is just it's an action item that Councilor Henry.
It's already part of the law. We've already created it.
Just needs to be brought forward. Now next is 5C apportionment, and they're suggesting to remove, quote, or when deemed appropriate by the tribal council, and put back in the resulting percentage shall determine the number of representatives per district. All percentage points 0.5 or higher shall be rounded upward to the nearest whole number, and all percentage points less than 0.5 should be rounded downward to the nearest whole number.
You see the wisdom of that percentage, do you not? That language. You round off the number. And I don't know what consideration you all gave to remove that language.
Madam Chairman?
Yes, Councilor.
The reason we removed the language about the percentages is that with the passages of 0101, there's no districts that have more than one representative. Each representative has one district. So there's no need for that language to round up or round down. This language was good and appropriate when we had multiple councilors per district, but now that's not the law of the land. It's one per district.
So are all lines clear? So when you get the actual legislation, and Councilor Henry, would you please work with Shelley to make sure that they have a complete set of the other amendments that might be loss of context? Yes.
And also, as to the language, or when deemed appropriate by the tribal council, this was a language that was actually submitted into the amendment when we were discussing it in debate. And I believe the committee's or subcommittee's reasoning is that due to population shifts and knowledge of growth areas, that maybe every 12 years was not sufficient, and so we hold it at mandatory every 12 years, and add the language or when deemed appropriate by the council. And I know that was debated. If you wish to revisit it, that's by all means.
I don't think they're asking us to revisit that. So okay, so all minds are clear on the third one. So then we have 52C, enforcement, notice to law enforcement and regulation, and they're asking to change precinct official to precinct inspector.
Correct. For the same reason that the inspector is the head man. He's the head. He's responsible for the actions at that polling place.
And I have a question for the lawyers in the room. So does that somehow pigeonhole people that if they circumvent the inspector, maybe for good reason, that they would be in violation of that law? Or, I mean, what does that do? Councilman Hodson?
Just to weigh in on it, as C is written, which is on page, somewhat new language on page 8 of the proposed amendments. It says persons engaged in conduct prescribed in paragraphs A and B, which prescribe certain electioneering, shall be subject to removal by local law enforcement and/or the Cherokee Nation Marshal Service at the request of the appropriate official, including but not limited to any precinct official, and commission's suggesting precinct inspector. I mean, I personally wouldn't want to limit it to that. Again, the commission can come up with its own chain of command, but I think any precinct official can request that somebody be removed, and if the Marshal Service has to go to the Election Commission to say who is the person with the authority here, the commission can say, well, here's our chain of command, and if they want to handle it internally. But I don't know if I'd narrow it as far as the commission wants to do in the amendments. So I guess I wouldn't support the change.
Councilor Henry.
Attorney here.
Attorney Henry.
And this is here, I'm going to play the devil's advocate. Let's say through a miscommunication or just, or even intentionally, an election commission does not appoint an inspector. They have precinct workers, obviously, but they forget to appoint an inspector. If we limit it to you're going to notify the inspector and there's no inspector, well, you're at a catch-22. If we leave it broadly open, where it can be any precinct board or any appropriate official, as the law says, and we include Councilperson Hoskins' language to be more inclusive, I think you'd be better off. Not saying that the situation would ever come that way, but it's always a possibility.
Thank you, Attorney Henry. Would any other tribal council like to weigh in on it? Do I hear a motion? Hearing none, we'll go on to the next item. We have 21C, re-registration for purposes of changing district and/or precinct. And that's to include within districts.
I think we just wanted to make it clear that if you moved within the district, you still had to re-register.
And I show that that's been, well, it was, part of it was passed. So we just want to take that under consideration when we go back to revisit that section.
Any further questions on that, Madam?
Councilor Garvin.
What would be the situation if your precinct no longer exists and you're still in the district? I was thinking the precinct is okay, but you'll no longer exist.
And I'm not certain, with all of the uncertainty that has arisen over redistricting, it's exactly what we are going to have. Whether some of this may be academic or not, we've got some ongoing litigation that may address that issue. So, I'll be honest with you, I couldn't anticipate exactly what you might run into.
I think that, I apologize, but I think it's a fair question because I think that we've been known to change precinct locations, so it would be a logistical deal where I believe the Election Commission would notify that person hasn't changed addresses, they would know that it's been eliminated and they would notify them. Prior to the election, you get a new red card. Is that fair enough?
Yes.
Okay. Attorney Henry, is your mind clear on what's being asked?
Mine is clear.
Okay, is that on, so I'm trying to look at page 4, where it looks like 21C1. Yes.
Is there a prohibition from, let's say you move your house, do you have to re-register precinct if you're in the same district? Or if you want to vote where you've always voted, you can go and vote in person?
You know, there's a lot of litigation in the past about where is your residence, whether it's where you physically, habitually return to each day, or whether or not it's your choice to name a certain place as a residence, and you move to another place and yet you haven't established another residence, you can continue to keep that residence. So it's kind of a...
Well, but our precincts are different. I mean, everybody votes in the same election the same day and for the same things. And I'm just saying, if I live closer to Briggs, do I have to vote at Briggs, or can I vote at Delacroix like I always have?
If you stay within the same precinct, I don't see any reason why you have to
It's a different precinct, same district.
Same district?
I mean, we have voting places. I guess they're all still the same precinct. I don't know if we're calling it different or not.
Mrs. Calico can answer that better than any of us, I believe.
Councilman Hoskins, you're next.
I think Councilman Baker has a question about precincts in the district. Let's say he lives by Pegs, but he wants to vote in Tahlequah. Does he have that option to do that today, or can we preserve that? Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm already registered at Tahlequah. And if I don't re-register, am I not registered? Or do I just come to vote?
You'll receive a card. Every registered voter receives a card telling them where your precinct is.
Right.
If that card comes back to us, we know you are not there. We try to locate you and say, where are you now? You're still registered in that precinct where you were.
Yeah.
Even though that card comes back to us, we can't find you. You're registered where you were. And if you come to us and move from Briggs to Tahlequah, we'll put you in Tahlequah.
The problem is, I have the same address I've had for 30 years.
Yes, sir.
So the card's going to come to me. Do I have a moral obligation to vote someplace different? Or a legal obligation?
May I rephrase it for you?
Please.
Is that in terms of our elections, a district's a district, and you can have multiple precincts associated, but it wouldn't be like a mainstream election where a precinct would determine either a council ward or, you know, a block away, a different count. There's not a precinct within the same district. It shouldn't matter.
That's correct. Right. There could be.
But he's asking under this language if he would be in trouble as a registered voter if they discovered that he didn't vote in the proper precinct based on his address. Is that correct?
But my opinion...
Not my address, but where I lay my head at night.
Right. My opinion would be, though, that if you were registered within the district and voted within the district, that would be an unlawful ballot.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilman Hoskins.
Oh, I think you hit on it, Madam Chairman. I mean, our precincts are precincts of convenience, not precincts of any geographic significance, so.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So do I hear a motion on this? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to 37B. Change eligibility determination appeals to Cherokee Nation Supreme Court to candidate eligibility determination appeals to Cherokee Nation Supreme Court, so would add the word candidate. Do I hear a motion?
And that's probably what it means, is for candidate. It just doesn't say it.
Yeah.
Councilwoman?
I would just like to hear the reasoning behind adding that word.
Excuse me?
I would like to hear what your reason is for wanting to add that word.
For clarification.
Well, it almost sounds like that you no longer want to have your hearing in front of the board when candidate eligibility comes into question.
Well, that's an appeal. We'd still have the hearing. And if the candidate was
about where it's supposed to go, whether it goes to district court or whether it goes to the Supreme Court?
Well, there is some question whether the Supreme Court would hear it or not, or whether they refer it back to district court. they're consistently doing that now on a number of issues. And I'm not sure what the answer to that is.
Would this clarify it, Lloyd?
Yes.
Okay, and then I would defer to
Attorney Embry.
I would agree with the amendment if we, it's basically changing the title of 37B, just adding the word candidacy. But if you read the first sentence of 37B, it says, an appeal of any decision of the Election Commission concerning eligibility shall be filed with the Cherokee Nation Supreme Court in writing within 5 days after receipt of Election Commission notice of denial or approval of eligibility for candidacy. So it's specifically, for candidacy. And adding the word candidate to the title is not going to be a problem.
Move to approve.
second.
So Councilman Baker moving the motion and Councilwoman Jordan made the second. Do I hear any further comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. So we added the word candidate to the title of 37B. Next, with 37D, conduct of hearing decision. On the last sentence, add the word final. The decision of the Cherokee Nation Supreme Court regarding candidate eligibility shall be final. And we have a motion to approve by Councilman Hoskins. Do I hear a second? And Councilwoman Fishing Hawk, seconded. Councilman Cobb.
I'd like to know, I'd like to know Attorney Embry's, I always ask the question from the attorney when I see something written in an absolutes, I always just want to know where we are. So in 37D, final is fairly absolute. So I'm just kind of wanting to know your opinion on that.
Well, no, I would agree with that. I mean, they should have said the word final. And the, whatever the decision of the Cherokee Nation Supreme Court regarding candidacies, should be final, because we should not, that's the highest court of our land. Decades of federal court decisions have held be consistent that this is an internal tribal affair. So whatever, they don't need a right of appeal outside of the Supreme Court, and we shouldn't give it to them. So the Supreme Court should be the final decision.
Councilman Jack Baker.
Yes, the actual legislation has the word final.
Yeah, it is.
It's just that on page 9, the word final was left off. So it's a moot point.
Thank you. So Attorney Embry, you'll make sure that we get a clean copy so that we can eliminate some of this additional time going forward in meetings, maybe?
Correct.
Okay. So now we are on 44E, anonymous contributions, and it just says leave the paragraph as is, so no action requested.
Yes, and Madam Chairman, we're not privy to the basis upon which this paragraph was eliminated or is being eliminated, and so that might change our attitude. But as far as we're concerned, we think this is appropriate subject to address, and so we're not privy to why the whole paragraph's been eliminated.
I'm sorry, but what are you asking?
To reinstate that paragraph. It's marked out. It appears that it's been deleted.
Okay, Attorney Embry and
then at our last meeting, as Councilman Baker said, we filed that ground. The vote of the committee was to leave it as is, and the vote of the committee was not to add in 52B. So just this last meeting, we covered both of that.
Okay. All right, so there is no issues with 44E or 52B. Councilman Hoskins, did you still want to address that?
I withdraw.
Okay. Now we're on to 43E, contributions information. They're asking that we change from the candidate or financial agent shall forward this information to the Election Commission and the reports required herein. Anonymous contributions are prohibited to the candidate or financial agent shall forward this information to the Election Commission, period. So a delete in the reports required herein and anonymous contributions are prohibited.
That was just for clarification purposes.
Madam Chairperson.
Yes, Attorney Embry.
This was an item that was tabled at our last meeting, and we were going to revisit it here today. So there has been no action taken by the committee.
Do we want to take this item up at this time, or do you want to wait until we begin down our sheet on items on 10? The top of page 10. So 43E, if we are going to take that up, we would need to hear a motion to eliminate, after election commission, we would delete in the reports required herein, and in the sentence anonymous contributions are prohibited. Do I hear a motion? Hearing. So, yes, Councilman Baker.
Just a comment. Starting with section 43E, which we did table last month, we haven't discussed, approved any of the changes after that point. That's on the list.
And I believe that they have asked to come forward at the beginning so they could go on about their lives. So I was trying to give them the courtesy of going through their issues. Is that okay?
Yes, and this is, it looks like a matter of policy for the tribal council to address, but we just wanted to have some clarification on it. Is it the law now, or is it not? Are we to observe and enforce it, or is there some issue that it's being deleted?
I think to answer your question, we're not done with election law reform. So to be fair to all, we don't have a final.
Good. All right.
Now, of course, we operate under what we've got today, which is whatever's been passed by full council and signed by the chief, of course. But this process is not done.
Well, it was marked out on the copy that was given to me, and so I really didn't know, and I don't think we
I think that you'll find a whole different world once you have context with the legislation, unfortunately or fortunately. So, Councilman Hoskins.
I wonder, Madam Chairman, could we just proceed as discussion only and have the commission just go over each of
Answer
these
questions? That would be a great compromise.
That'd be fine.
Okay, so rather than having motions, we're going to have a discussion. If you have any questions, we're on 43E. Does anybody have any questions of the election commission as to their intent or the deletion? Hearing none. 62D, they're requesting we add an additional 3 extra days beginning on the third Thursday in June. Councilman Hoskins.
And we have changed our mind about the 3rd June because of some issues coming up. We make it the week before any election because I don't think June's going to fit. That date's not going to fit, I think, in every situation.
So it would read add 3 extra days beginning the week prior to the election.
Before any election, that's correct. Whether it's general or special.
Okay, Councilman Hoskins, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate that you all want to expand the walk-in voting. I think the more we can do to expand it, the better. But
we've seen the popularity of it.
Sure. Have you considered, and do you know what the cost will be to your budget, or even a ballpark estimate? I ask that because of, obviously there's a finite amount of resources, and certainly we can't have I guess we can't have in-person voting everywhere. It'd be nice if we could, because folks in Bonita, Oklahoma are just not driving to Tahlequah to vote. They're just not. And the more that we do in-person in Tahlequah, that's great, but obviously there's a limit to how far out people are willing to drive. So I wondered if you could evaluate what this would cost and then compare it to what it would cost if we keep the in-person voting as is, but expand the locations, perhaps further up north. And if you could maybe get back to us, maybe we can consider that as we go forward.
We are concerned about the budget because of some of the legal issues that's pending right now that'll have an influence on this election. So we are kind of in a quandary of what it's going to cost us, and it doesn't look like that we can use past elections with any certainty to address a budget right now. We've asked your council, Mr. Henry, and I both have this case the chief has filed has been assigned to one of the district judges. We have contacted him and urged him to expedite this matter so that we can get these issues resolved. because our budget's going to be reflected by how that decision comes out.
So we have 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure your question was answered correct.
It was, thank
And we have Counselor Fulbright has the floor now.
Thank you. My question is similar to his. Since we're in the southernmost county, people down there missed out on voting because they said, I'm not going to drive all the way to Telefar. And I think it would be a great idea. I don't know how we would fund it to expand it maybe to a southern location and a northern location, to add 2 more walk-in voting, because it is a very popular idea and people really like it.
Thank you. So I believe there's an action item. If we could have a budget proposal back and some potential site locations to get some more geographic diversity, this body would appreciate
We
it.
talked about this in detail, and we'll discuss it even more. And
So-
the budget issues and everything, I'm sorry.
And
Thank
we'll
you.
report back to your committee on
I
that.
appreciate that. So the next item is remove and at, the language and at any other locations that the election commission deems necessary and appropriate. Does anyone have any questions about that? So at the top of the second page, after the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it asks to remove in that same 62D the power for the election commission to add any other locations that they deem necessary and appropriate.
And I think that's what Madam Member was asking, that we consider having other locations.
So the body hasn't posed a question, but I'm going to pose one. Why would you want to take that power away from your body for the ability to do that?
I don't think we would want that taken away from us,
Okay,
if that's the way you read it.
that's the way I read it. Attorney Embry?
Yeah, the idea in this proposed amendment is to have walk-in absentees Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in telephone. That's what the law says. We would add the language, or any other locations that the election commission deems necessary and appropriate. The idea is to put it in the hands of the election commission to see, do we need a walk-in place up north or south?
You do read it the same way?
Yes. The intent is not to depoliticize it by leaving it with the election commission to see where the voting box is and where they need to put
Okay.
additional walk-in places.
Does anybody else have any additional questions on that item? So to keep moving, so 77A and 78 both deal with leaving the word affidavit instead of declaration. Is that a legal term that we need to address, that it needs to be an affidavit rather than a declaration? Yes, Attorney.
This goes to the whole debate of whether you're going to have an affidavit absentee or a statement of that's who you are. So that's a policy decision for you guys.
We're going to get to that eventually. This is just a review of
We are
questions.
just, while they're here, we're giving them the courtesy that they don't have to show next time if they don't necessarily, other than your action items.
Obviously, from this proposal, the election commission is suggesting that we have affidavits, correct?
Well, and the next
That's
item
correct.
is you're suggesting we do leave it with the notary of public?
Yes.
Okay. I think that just is up to this body to decide that at that point.
And that is the case in the body of work in the state of Oklahoma under their election laws. Corresponds to the same procedure that they have.
Yes, Councilwoman.
Lloyd, is it your belief that if we have them go in front of a notary, it will cut down on any fraud that might be involved?
I don't say it'll cut down on any fraud, because if there's, determination to be fraudulent about it, they'll sign a fraudulent affidavit without any. But yes, I think that's the assurance we need to have some assurance as the election commission, some document to rely upon. And of course, if it's determined that that is a fraudulent affidavit, then you have the AG's office, the prosecutorial authority of the Cherokee Nation to pursue felony cases against them, as the state of Oklahoma can. But I think that's the only thing. I don't know of any other choice but to have an affidavit duly sworn to before the notary public.
So if we have let's say some little lady come to the polling place and say, I want to vote, and we're showing her on the books as already having received absentee, if we don't have the notary on there, how will we trace back who might have voted in her place? Can you think of any way without that notary that we could even start an
No,
investigation?
I don't, you'd have to have some documentation that she was there, that she did in fact go ahead and vote again. Or that she did not vote, her word or statement of it.
So the notary is a key person in
It
this
is.
process?
It is.
Are there any other questions? We'll keep moving. So the next one is change challenged ballot to provisional ballot.
That's
Mine's clear on
what a
why.
challenge ballot is, a provisional ballot.
Okay. If there's no questions, we'll continue to move along. It's asking that in the section that we change to 9 to 5. Is this the walk-in ballot?
Yes.
Is this to allow for that? So I guess we'll work with Attorney Hembry to make sure that all lines are clear on any. Okay. Next item is 53 watchers. And it removes that whole entire sentence on watchers having the power or ability to contact election commission when witnessing something improper.
Again, we have that issue of terminology that we've already addressed previously, whether it should be an inspector or whether it should be a member of the election commission.
Councilman Hoskins.
Well, I would only be for removing it because it's probably not necessary, because watchers can call the election commission just like any other citizen, so it's probably not necessary, but you're not suggesting that a watcher can't pick up the phone and call the election commission?
No, as you say, nor anyone else who's interested and has a legitimate issue to raise with any of the members of the commission.
Councilman Baker.
Has this been a problem in the past, the watchers calling and tying up the lines or anything?
I'd have to address that to...
I think Martha should answer that.
Ms. Calco, did you want to come forward?
Only a time or two.
So it's not a big problem.
Okay.
I mean, the watchers theoretically are the folks that are running for office recommend, and they're there to see that everything is legal and according to the whole point and yada, yada, yada. I don't know that I would be opposed to them being able to call it, although I think they take your phones away, don't they? I think there's only one phone at the precinct.
Attorney Hembry, did you want to address Baker's question?
And I think that's the whole idea of the reason behind this proposed amendment, is right now, your watchers, that, I'm candidate A and I choose Lloyd Cole to be my watcher. Under the statute, he has the ability to, in such cases, the watcher shall be limited to observing the repair or maintenance work being performed and making a written record of such work. Well, he can, the whole thing says that they can watch and observe and they can make written record. The purpose of the amendment is to actually give them the legal authority, the ability to contact, if they see illegal or questionable activities, to call the election commission. Right now, they don't. Ergo, they take their phones away from them now. If this amendment would pass, you'd have the right to have your phone, and if you actually saw something that the watcher deemed inappropriate or questionable, that they could call an election commission or a hotline or whatever number that they do. That's the reasoning on it, and it's just up to you all whether you go forward.
And Madam Chairman, it would seem to me that the most appropriate thing for that watcher to do is make that objection, whatever it is, the observation, to the inspector, so that it would be addressed, and that's that inspector's responsibility to communicate that on to the commission or any irregularity or any problem that arises there. So you might give that consideration when you talk about this.
This committee will take that into consideration. We have two more items, but I believe Councilor Crittenden's hand was up. No. Okay. So 62 manner of voting generally, and its procedure for at-large voters is a new proposed amendment. I mean, is there...
It speaks for itself.
Yeah, and I don't know why maybe we wouldn't want that at-large voters are automatically mailed a ballot unless they asked for in person. But that, we can consider that at that time.
Okay.
So challenge ballots, that's the same as provisional ballots. If there's no other questions of the election commission, it is 4 o'clock and time for resources. So does anyone have any questions for Chairman Johnson or his committee or commission?
I would ask if there was any way possible that some representative from the commission come the next couple of times that we talk about this, so we could get your point of view on some of these that we just now went over that we had not discussed the areas yet, if that would be possible.
Would be glad to provide somebody.
We're talking about the rules meetings that we're in now.
Well, it's actually a
This special subcommittee.
and we
Yep,
could-
well, the subcommittee like we're at now, we've attended, in course, the last 3 or 4 anyway.
And I didn't know whether this was because we were not going to be able to continue, and if you could just send one of your
There'll be at least one of us
Okay.
here.
We still want you to come.
And on behalf of the council, we want to thank you again for your time, and I really appreciate even if it was in front of us and we were kind of having to read through as we went, I greatly appreciated the dialogue, and I'm sure that the council did as
Well,
well.
we appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time, and, you know, this is exactly what we wanted to happen, and that's have some dialogue, and for you to consider our input into some of these issues.
Now, I think there will be several positive things come out of this. So do I hear a motion to adjourn? And all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. We
Thank
are
you very
adjourned.
much and have a good day.
5 minutes for resources.
That's right.